All right. Over to you, sir. Thank you so very much.
CA technologies. I'll be giving you a little bit of an overview of what CA is doing in the world of DevOps. So to begin with, how many of you have heard of the term DevOps? How many of you know or have been working in the sort of the domain of DevOps or something around that? Okay, so we had a few hands up, so I think that's a good sign. I think DevOps paradigm has been sort of picking up. Even if you do a search, the number of searches have been improving. I think over the last couple of years, or maybe 3 to 4 years, CA has been ramping up its capability around DevOps. And there is a good reason for that, right? We are saying businesses are changing their business models around software. There was a large bank CEO that had, who spoke to, one of our CEO, CA CEO, and said, you know what, we think we are like a software company. They're actually a bank, but they're saying we're thinking like we are like a software company. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars, an extraordinary amount of effort just building differentiated softwares so that we can keep our customers. And here is a good example, right? So now software is just not something that's on the desktop or a laptop. It's moving to different devices. It's bands that I'm sure some of you probably already have. This is something, I don't know if you've seen it. This looks like a Tesco, a grocery store, but it's actually not. It's actually a subway station in Korea. What they have done is basically printed those, almost the store size papers or wallpapers with QR codes of different products. There, you can go with your cell phone while you're waiting for your subway. You can, basically scan those, order those, and by the time potentially, you reach home, you have that. Set of groceries back home, right? So, a lot of these things happening with a significant speed. You can see, these numbers. These are almost mind-boggling. Right? The number of tweets, number of searches, number of emails that get sent out, number of Facebook updates, and so on. Now, with all that happening, people are already talking about the Internet of Things, right? So that's going to extend that out to, not only just, obvious devices, but not so obvious devices like the cow there. Like there is a Dutch company, Dutch company today who's actually embedding a chip in the cow underneath the skin to monitor it, because as you can imagine, there are probably hundreds and thousands or tens of thousands of cows. It's a fairly dairy-centric economy, Dutch among other things. So managing the the health of the cows are fairly important for them, right? So they're embedding a chip that sends information about their health and things like that. So that's where the Internet of Things is going. So with all these apps, we are talking about not just the Internet of Things. We're not talking just mobile. We are talking about a lot of other things. You have e-readers, you have smart TVs, your game consoles. All of them come with embedded applications. But the challenge there now is the bar has been raised, right? The level of tolerance that people have with bad apps or bad quality apps is actually decreasing, right? So the tolerance is decreasing. 25% of people will abandon a website just waiting for 3 to 5 seconds. That's a study. Or almost 90% of apps are not visited more than once, primarily because they don't have the kind of quality that people would expect today, right? So because they are dealing constantly on a day in and day out basis with all these apps, and they are seeing that quality. So the biggest challenge today, or driver for that kind of an app economy, as we call it, are the obvious things, right? Time to market, speed, quality, and the cost. So these are the three things actually are driving that app economy for you today. Now, how does DevOps fit in here? One of the things that DevOps actually talks about is how do I make sure that the applications that I'm developing today, with all the agile methodologies that I have in place, are going to the market faster, cheaper, and better in terms of quality. Now, when I'm taking a code, I'm building sort of a snap or a software, there are two sort of mindsets in a DevOps type of paradigm. One is the developers, or people who are innovating. You're bringing change, right? So the development community is bringing new types of changes, new types of features, new application, new innovative ideas, and building them. So they're bringing change. On the other side, if you think about the operations guys, what's their primary goal? primary goal is to keep everything stable, right? Applications which are running should not have any kind of P1, P2, P3 issues. The stability is the key concern. Availability and performance of those applications is key concern. Every time there is a change in their environment, which means every time there is a new feature, new function, new application coming into their environment, that operations, production environment, there is instability, and at least that fear of instability in the environment. And that's where, a lot of focus today of, people, processes, and technology is being focused, and what we call as DevOps, right? Is that how do I make sure that the development processes, development tools, and the operations processes, people and tools actually are working much better together, so that it almost is seamless. Today it's basically a big wall, right? I mean, you throw it over the wall, and it's for them to manage. If a P1 comes in, they don't come to the developer. That doesn't come to the development team, right? It goes to the operations team. The operations team pretty much don't know much about the application, and they have to figure it out. What's wrong. Come back and make it stable. Go back to developers. Try to see what's the problem and so on. And that's what the DevOps is trying to say. DevOps is saying development operations need to work well with each other, right? That's basically the idea. You will see a number of definitions for that. How is CA working with this? Now, CA is basically, if you look at this, in the whole DevOps environment, you first start off with development of applications. Development of applications, we're talking about, the development process faces a lot of constraints in terms of dependencies. If you think about the software architecture today, it's fairly distributed, right? It's not like one monolithic applications, maybe like 20 years back or 15 years back. They're distributed, so you're talking to the mainframe, you're talking to an ERP, you're talking to a backend core banking system and so on. And that's a good thing, right? Because, you don't want to have one big application doing everything. But the downside of that is, of course, there are a lot of dependencies on all these applications. When they have dependencies, I have to make sure those dependencies are taken care of when I'm testing and building and testing my application. Every time I have a small piece of code, I'm going to unit test it and it makes a call to the mainframe. I have to make sure that's available, right? Otherwise, I have to wait till I move it to the integration testing piece. I just have to do some basic stubbing and then I have to move forward, right? That's the constraint that we are trying to eliminate. And we'll talk about what it does. Automated environment and application release. Once that code is built, you have to make sure that it's moving to production in a fairly continuous and a seamless manner. Today, it's a lot of scripting and manual, intervention that is required. You sit with an Excel, you sit with the different, release guys, and understand what are the different steps that are going to happen, which database have to go, what is the login password for dev versus what is the login password for staging, and kind of almost orchestrate that manually, the whole release process, right? The testing process. It is getting better. You have automated testing, but how do I make sure that testing becomes part of the release? Testing is not something different, especially the automated part of the testing happens as part of the release, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And once the application is in production, we start continuously monitoring it, and not just monitor it, but we understand how data is being used in your production, and sort of some way to feed it back into my development environment, give them production quality like data, so that now I have regression test cases, I have data that is very, very close to production, right? And that's what the continuous monitoring piece actually does for you. And these are some of the applications that, the solutions that we have. And I'm going to talk primarily about the service virtualization and release automation more so. But we have test data management suite. We have cloud managers, basically sort of an OEM partner with service mesh and so on. But let me move forward specifically around those two areas, right? The two areas being, how do I make sure my applications are built quickly without any wait times that I have to wait for my constraints, and then I move it forward into the production environment. If you look, I don't think this is very visible, but maybe I'll just point it out. So one piece is waiting for the code. Now what happens is, I spoke a little bit about constraints. Maybe I'll just go directly here because that's not very visible. Two areas that we focus on. Service virtualization. What does it do? Service virtualization essentially says that I am able to simulate the behavior of my dependent systems. I have a mainframe system, I have an ERP system, I have a back office system. All these systems are basically constrained because if my e-banking software is my system under test, and I have to talk to these 5 different systems behind, behind that system, my system under test, then the problem is now I have to make sure the data is there for my test, it is accurate, it is current, that system is available, things like that, right? Now all of that has to be managed, and service virtualization basically allows you to simulate that and essentially sort of remove that constraint. So how do we do it? And again, I don't want to get too much into details about this, but essentially what happens is we have multiple ways to do this. One, if the system is available, let's again take an example of iBanking, internet banking, and a core banking, right? You're building some model in an iBanking system and you're testing against the core banking system. We put a recorder in between. We listen to the conversation. We'll assume obviously the core banking exists. We listen to the conversation. So we understand what protocol, what is the data protocol, what is the transport protocol. The listener actually, a piece of agent that sits in between. We'll listen to all of that, and not only that, the protocol and the data protocol, but it also understands the data that it's capturing and understands the different scenarios. So you're listening in between, and all these transactions are happening in your iBanking system. Somebody's depositing something, somebody's withdrawing something, somebody's depositing a check or whatever that may be. All these transactions getting captured, and we use that to create a virtual service. So what happens is, sorry, I move forward. So what happens is, once I have recorded for let's say a week or maybe 2 days or 3 days, depending on how the customer wants it, I can now essentially point my iBanking to this virtual service rather than to the core banking and start testing those transactions against those virtual services. Okay, so that's how basically it works. Now, you might say, what happens if the iBanking system is not available? You can use request response pairs. If it is basically a web service type of an interaction, then you can use request response pairs. You can use WSDLs, and you can actually, sort of ground up also build it. If you don't have anything, you just have the engineering specs. You can build ground up, go into the system. It's probably take a slightly longer time than just recording. But what that means is though, and I'm sure you come across this, right? That you're building in parallel. There are 4 different modules being built in parallel, and none of them are ready. But you know what those systems are going to talk about. You have those request response pairs. I'm going to, in your engineering specs, you're going to say that here is a request. I'm going to go send you with an account ID. You're going to send me all these transaction details, right? You've defined those, or maybe many companies define that before you start developing. Once you have that, you can build those virtual services as well. So a lot of things can be done to build those virtual services. And probably the last but one slide is, these are the kind of the benefits that our customers have seen, right? And this is an independent study done. So reduction in software cycles. I talked about the shift left type of movement of a lot of work that gets done. The software life cycle shrinks. You have test cycle shrink, right? Why again test cycle shrink? Because a lot of these bugs are already being caught in development now, because now everything is available to them for them to test. Nothing is happening much in integration testing, where you traditionally find a lot of bugs. So test cycles themselves are shortening. Since everything is shortening, obviously the whole time to market changes. Test coverage is much better. Why? Again, the same thing. Every system is available now in a bank in a box, or whatever your retail systems in a box, or however you want to do it. Why is this all important? All of this is important for DevOps, because now I'm trying to say that I'm basically I'm sort of the customer, my end business is basically requesting me to do more releases, right? How many businesses have you seen? How many customers have you seen? Once a quarter is good enough for me, right? They would want more, right? And the only way we can do this more is, being able to shrink those life cycles, so that we can do more in the same amount of time, right? So that's basically the goal. Here are some of the customers, whether it's in all verticals, and we have almost 250 customers, 100 plus in banks, and so on. I'm going to quickly talk about the other piece of it. So remember, I spoke about 2 things. One is a lot of innovation is happening on the development side. You're agile. Let me build this up a little bit, actually. Right. So you're doing agile development, you're doing test automation, you're doing continuous integration, all that, but it's all there, right? The innovation or the new features, functionality, innovative ideas that you're building has to go to production before it becomes value for the business, finally, right? That transition today still takes time. It's still manual, it's still error prone. Why? Because somebody is sitting with a bunch of scripts and have a sort of a Excel sheet, and I don't know how many of you have done or been participants of those releases, large, war rooms, all the people, logged into that call, and now day and night and 24/7 for 3-4 days, you're sitting if there is a very large application. It's very common, and it's not just, now they were doing in a month or maybe once in 2 months. The moment it shrunk so much, they're now thinking about more releases, and that's what businesses finally want. The moment I have an idea, can I take it to production very quickly, right? That significantly changes, and this automation actually allows you to do that. So that's pretty much all I have. There is a little booth behind, and my colleague Lenin is sitting there. We have some brochures. If you have questions, feel free to ask him. Do drop in your cards. But before we end, if there are maybe do we have time for a couple of questions?
We will take 2 questions.
2 questions. Yeah.
One more.
With this stuff and virtualization, because and another thing is, what are the best tool right now available in the market if can use for virtualization? In my company we are using IDQ, so I'm not.
Which one is using?
IDQ Lisa.
Okay, so CA has acquired that almost 4 years back. So that's what we're talking about actually. IDQ Lisa.
Right.
Right?
Because once you create stuff in virtualization.